It's a Guy Jeans podcast.
Hey, you guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm your host, Guy Jeans. Thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. If you're listening on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe to this channel and make a comment in the comment section below. If you're listening on iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts, please make sure to write a quick review as it helps the podcast grow, and it's totally appreciated. Also, if you get a chance, please share this podcast with all your friends and family, as that helps too. This is season number 3, episode number 95, and today is kind of cool in that I'm taking clips from various previous podcasts that I've done with different biologists, a professor from UCLA, a person from Caltrout, a fish and wildlife game warden, and a conservationist. All these clips are super interesting to me, and I hope that they are for you too. So let's get started with the first clip from episode number 18 with retired California Fish and Game Warden Terry Mullen as he talks about catching some bobcat poachers.
Go home, don't keep doing that kind of stuff. I've had other situations too, but, nothing like about what you're about to tell everybody too, which is pretty incredible. So you sent me a picture, which blew my mind, and for you guys, if you guys can imagine, it's Terry, the warden, holding, I believe, bobcat pelts. Mm-hmm. And there's, I don't know how many on there. There's like maybe 20.
There was a total of 62.
Oh, so 62 pelts. And he's holding them up, and there's a picture of him. And so you want to elaborate on what happened with that? That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, bobcat trapping now in California is illegal. The commercialization of bobcat pelts. Several years ago, it was legal to actually trap bobcats, and they had body gripping traps back in the days when Mike Stone was working. But when I came on, it was box traps. And
a quick question: what do they do with these pelts?
Actually, there is a market. There was a market, probably still is. For example, over in Russia and China, some of these colder areas, on the globe. If people have, lots of money, then, what's one of the? You look at it. People drive very expensive vehicles. They have very expensive homes. They have very expensive diamonds, and fur here in California and the United States is, it's taboo. Some people don't like to see it, and you go to other parts of the country, and it's like, hey, we this is what we wear. It helps keeps us warm. So there actually is a market.
Okay.
And everything that we do in law enforcement is you follow the money. There's always money to be made, and that's why I think the crimes are being committed. So this particular situation is actually a number of them, but
where was this?
This is. I don't want to be too.
Okay. Yeah, let's go.
Let's say it's in California.
Okay, good. Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, it's in California, and I'll just tell you. I'll just tell you this: that I used to teach bobcat trapping at the Fish and Game Academy. Actually, testified alongside the director of Fish and Game, and talked to the commission about, bobcat trapping. And, the necessity of, these people were maintaining for some people, it's a heritage for them. They grew up hunting and fishing and trapping and chasing bears with dogs and what have you, and that became taboo. And so what happened on this particular case is we have a person that they were raised trapping, and it's body gripping traps is that's what they do, and it's
the clamping,
anything that grips the body,
okay,
and prevents it, as a body gripping trap. And what was happening is when you trap a bobcat with a body gripping trap, it's indiscriminate. It traps everything. It traps a kitty cat, it traps a rabbit, it traps a raccoon, a possum, anything. It's indiscriminate. And so they went to these live box traps that have a guillotine door that shuts behind it whenever the animal goes into the cage, puts its nose on the scent ball, and then, boom, now you have a live, whatever it is, inside the trap. It's like, oh, I don't want that. That's a raccoon, that's a rabbit, and then they let it go. Greed gets the best of most of us. And whenever there's money to be made, what was happening is at this particular time, the average price of a bobcat was about $674 per person. The top cat in that year was $2,100. That's for one bobcat. I actually had people that were taking 2 months of leave of absence to go and trap bobcat. They were making anywhere from $45,000 to $60,000 in 2 months.
Oh, wow.
So the smuggler's blues, the lure of easy money.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fun. I actually went out with, some guys that were, trapping. I got to watch trapping, firsthand. I would set trail cameras, and I got really good at tracking humans. And I ended up teaching at the academy on, how to set trail cameras and how to track humans, and how do you actually keep your feet off of the ground when you're walking out to check a trap? Because the trapper, he's making his money looking at the ground, and surely he's going to see your boot heel print, right? So I used to carry multiple sets of shoes in my patrol vehicle. I wore sandals. I wore, different types of soles.
Interesting.
I actually kept a large wool green army blanket with me. And so what I would do is actually lay the magic carpet out in front of me, and I'd walk over it. And then I would just walk right to their trap, because it kind of distributes evenly your weight. You go out there, you look at whose trap it is, and sometimes there's no trap number, which is a violation. It's in the wrong place. It's on private property. It hasn't been checked because you had your trail camera on it, and they're supposed to be checked, daily. And so I would actually start zeroing in on the very, very small percentage of people that weren't doing it right. And that's something I saw in Fish and Game too. We used to call them the 1%ers. 99% of the folks that are out there trying to get a critter are doing it right.
Mm-hmm.
It's the 1%ers. It's the repeat offenders.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that we zero in on. And those are the people that I enjoyed chasing, because there's really no better thrill than chasing a two-legged animal that has the same intellect as you.
Oh my God, that's funny. Yeah, how fun.
It's fun.
Oh my God.
It's the funnest job I ever had.
This next clip is from Professor Michael Shin from episode number 50. Michael Shin is a professor in the UCLA Department of Geography. He is an expert in geospatial methods and techniques. And in this clip, he talks about climate change and golden trout.
Should. And as I understand, because there is such pressure on that particular stream network, it's recovered. You definitely can catch rainbows and big fish now. Yeah. But at the same time, it's again, it goes back to how much management do you want? What makes it a natural experience? Everything is constructed to a certain degree and managed. Yeah. And I'm not sure if the public really understands the amount of work it takes to keep the fishery healthy, and then what exactly healthy means, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess too, just kind of, for your information, fishing up in that area, the Wenatchee area, and just basically the South Fork of the Kern, let's say. There is, there still is a lot of golden trout, but they're mixed in with like golden hybrid slash with brown trout as well in there. Right. Uh-huh. And then, so, there are a lot of fish, but they don't, I'm not sure if they're like, they all seem to not be like completely pure. Every once in a while you'll see one that goes, oh, that, that one looks pure, but you start seeing a lot of spots on them, in other words, on the ones down in that area. Another interesting thing, and maybe you can, shed light on this for me. There's a creek that's a tributary to the South Fork of the Kern, and this is crazy, right? So there's this creek that's a tributary to the South Fork of the Kern, and I love fishing it. It's a little tiny stream, but it has pure Australian golden trout in it, and it doesn't have any brown trout in it or anything like that. It's just this beautiful stream. And the last couple of years, it dries up completely, right? Yeah. I mean, like dust. Like you go into it and you're like, oh my God, it's just sand in here, And then the next year you go back there in the spring and it's full of trout again.
Yeah.
And wild fish. And I'm like, how is that even possible? How does that even work? It's unbelievable. It's like, how does that,
really is.
I don't understand it, and it's always mind boggling to me because the stream is completely dry.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you go back there in the spring, and usually it flows year round, right?
Yeah.
And then you go back there in the spring and there's good flows and the fish are back. And it's like, what? And they're, they don't stock it or anything, it's all wild.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What do you think that is? Are they just swimming?
No, I think the simplest explanation is, life finds a way.
Right.
In the sense that
mind-boggling to me.
It is. It really is, because I know in Wenatchee Meadows they have that endangered frog.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing where, a lot of these lowland areas and marshes will be completely dry at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
And they haven't seen the frog for a while, and then all of a sudden it reappears, and then there's a new birth and regeneration.
Yeah.
I think it's, if you just think about how far salmon migrate, on their spawning runs,
right?
Trout or salmon you kind of got to think they've made it, they've survived this long, and if you see the effort with which salmon travel upstream,
right,
to get to the spawning grounds, I just would imagine that the survival instinct in some of these fish, as the temperature goes up, I'm sure there's certain signals that these fish take, and they just, in search of cooler water, they'll definitely travel higher. But if the headwaters are completely dry, they're going to go down to the lake or to some holding pond or something. That's that's a good explanation for sure.
What's also interesting is you get like completely dry, like at Kennedy Meadows, right? Where that bridge is there, and that you go there, in the summertime, dust, completely dry, just nothing, But downstream, that you've got like these creeks coming in, Trout Creek and Machine Creek and all these different creeks that are like flowing all the time, and that makes sense. They'll be down there, and then as the water gets bigger, they're going to migrate up for sure.
Yeah.
It's got to be what's going on. Or they're holding
and I have a lot.
Yeah.
I have colleagues, that's their research specialty is groundwater, because I think, as when you go up to the high country and you see all these creeks and streams, and there's no snow on the mountains, you're thinking, where's all this water coming from, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it's, if you can think about these high altitude meadows as giant sponges.
Yeah.
And over the years, they've absorbed a lot of water, and they release it slowly, and it comes out in different places. But like you said, it's an amazing network and an amazing system that's at play here that helps all the wildlife survive.
Yeah.
Although, as you also noted, it's getting drier and drier, and I think it's going to get a little harder moving forward.
Yeah. I was trying to explain to my friends who's a non-believer in climate change and all this, you get those folks, and I always, I look at, like the Southern Sierra, and what's crazy about the Southern Sierra is you can see what's going on with the trees. The pine trees are just getting there. I mean, they're just dead. All in the Southern Sierra. It's throughout the whole Southern Sierra, but in the Southern Sierra especially, it is unbelievable the amount of dead trees, and then that darn bark beetle gets in there and just annihilates them. And so my question is, are you seeing this like all over the Sierra Mountains as far as like things just getting drier and drier, or all over the West?
It's all over the American West, and it's all over the world actually. Whether or not you believe it, I think maybe the question is do you appreciate the current relationship you have with the wilderness and the outdoors,
right?
And do you want to maintain it, right?
Yeah.
And I think I do, and I want to preserve it. I love being outdoors, and so I'm going to do everything I can, regardless of what's happening to help it. And I think the number of fires that we see in the American West increasing. It's a, like I said, it's a multifaceted issue. It's not completely nature at work. I mean, it's partly management, right?
Yeah.
You go into some forest and they're super dense because we haven't let anything burn.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a balance between letting some things burn and forestry,
Mm-hmm.
and not. So I mean, I don't think it's useful to talk in either or type of language, which we kind of often get ourselves in these debates, either your way or the highway, or my way or the highway. That doesn't do anybody any good.
Right.
So I'm more of I kind of try to take a more moderate and nuanced approach and think about, hey, I like to fish, and it kind of boils down to the selfish point of view, but at the same time, I think it's something everybody can relate to. That there's something out there if you like to camp, if you like to hike.
Yeah, absolutely. What's crazy is been doing. I've had my store. Well, gosh, now it's going on over 20 years, right? And so the change in the stream, and of course, I fished it, the Kern and all that way before that as well, before I actually opened up a business and whatnot. So it's been longer than that. But just in the amount of time that I've actually, had my fly shop and guide service, just the amount of, the amount of fires that I've seen in that area is mind-boggling. Just in the Southern Sierra Range, I think I've seen every mountain burn at least once in that area, and across Lake Isabella as well. But the thing is that's really interesting about that and the drought, and in 2002, we had this giant fire called the McNally Fire, and it just do you remember that? And it just
that one I do not.
It just burned and burned all the way up into the golden trout wilderness, and and then we had these record rains the next fall, the next winter, right? And so all that black sediment and everything goes into the upper current.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just a mess, and the river got up to, 35,000 cubic feet, where it was almost hitting the Kernville Bridge. It was just unbelievable. Yeah. But I mean, it's just insane, the amount of damage that is occurring in some of the areas. On a positive note, though, after everything cleared, all that sediment and everything turned into nice plants and nice. Life
finds a way, right? It's kind of there's no absolute right or wrong way to address these things. I mean, that's the thing. I think I'm sure Lake Isabella has never been as low as it's been recently.
God,
and that's the thing.
This next clip is from episode number 11 with California Department of Fish and Wildlife biologist Craig Feeler and Evan King, who discussed the Tule elk and the Rocky Mountain elk that have turned up in Kernville, California.
Yeah.
So
probably a couple of days a week I'm out there.
Let's talk about the Tule elk. So a lot of people don't know this, but I think it was yesterday a elk was spotted in Kernville. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people don't know that. I think that's the first time we've ever had an elk show up in Kernville, in the Kernville golf course.
Yesterday?
That was yesterday.
Oh, no. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, it's kind of neat to hear that. And I showed you guys the picture and stuff, and you guys confirmed it was an elk. And it was what kind do you think that was? It's hard to say.
I would say the hunch is Rocky Mountain elk.
Rocky Mountain elk. Okay.
Yeah, right.
So let's talk about a little bit about that. Okay. Let's talk about the Rocky Mountain elk versus the Tule elk. Mm-hmm. The Tule elk are endemic.
Endemic.
Yes. Yeah. And so let's talk about that, and what you guys know about that, the Tule elk, and then also the Rocky Mountain elk that are here as well.
Yeah. Sure.
The Tule elk are, it's a comeback story there. There's 3 remaining Tule elk left. Yeah. And
wow.
there was a rancher in Los Banos, and I hope I get the story right, but that's how he gathered them up, and between those 3 animals, that's what we have now for a herd.
Mm-hmm.
And
So this dude saved him.
He saved him. Yeah, that's
Sweet.
basically
Yeah.
late 1800s.
I want to say Henry Miller, but
Yeah, it was Henry Miller. It was Henry Miller.
So not to interrupt you, but so those guys, those 3. What about the ones that are over by Bishop? Is that a different herd, or is it the same ones?
The department put animals over there.
Okay.
Yeah, on purpose.
Okay, so that's from those 3?
Yep.
So the
Sweet.
population, from what I understand, they were moved from the area that the rancher's plot where he had them protected. They tried to put them on Yosemite, and then Yosemite's like, we don't want them anymore. They're getting a little bit too numerous, and so they were trying to find a place to put them. So the department came in and helped out, and they ended up in the Owens Valley. And then the Tule Elk Reserve is kind of outside of Bakersfield, is kind of where they some were retained there, but they got moved from there, and they've kind of just been repopulating certain spots. That's been like the donor population, the Tule Elk Reserve.
Yeah, they're doing awesome. I mean,
So how many are there now?
From what I understand, there's about 5,700 in the state.
Sweet.
Yeah, and
That's awesome.
yeah, they're
man.
doing really well.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do they like that kind of like high desert, or that kind of a desert kind of
They're valley floor,
Valley
floor,
floor, coastal,
grassland.
yeah,
Okay,
all the
cool.
way out. Yeah, they
open
don't,
country.
yeah, they don't do well in higher elevations, and that's
Okay.
like the kind of difference between these Rocky Mountain elk
Okay.
and then the Tule elk. They're native to the valley floor of California.
They would be
Okay.
in the grassland, and if you think of the historical condition of the valley, there used to be Tule Lake, and
Yeah.
Buena Vista Lake
Yeah.
was a lot bigger.
Okay.
And those lakes were commonly going and using those resources back before when they were available. And so, in the current areas now, they're in the grassland, and they use all kinds of open habitat at this point.
So are they going to start hunting them? Is that
We
what's
do
going to
already, yeah.
Or they've already
that's-
started?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, that's if you want, 3 of the, one of the species of elk, that Tule elk,
Popular.
Rocky Mountain, Roosevelt, and stuff. If you want to hunt that, you're gonna have to do it here in California.
California.
Yeah, and
very-
it's hard to do.
Is it?
Yeah, oh yeah. I just got my results. Didn't get tagged this year.
Oh, yeah?
Every year.
There's
So
a
how-
lottery in a lot of
How many
Yeah.
people get
for
it?
public hunts.
How many people get the?
God, I don't even know how many tags we give out, but it's in the hundreds.
Okay.
And there's these private land managements and landowners that are encouraged to do habitat restoration and stuff to enhance wildlife, and they get some tags allotted to them, and then there's the hunter like me and you and everybody that just wants to put in for it in the certain zones, and so
Lottery style.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is it the same type of deal? You hunt the bucks?
No, you can hunt both on some of these because the population's doing so well, and so
Oh, I
some of
see.
the these aren't as widespread, so sometimes they're in concentrated areas. Grizzly Island's a good example. It's like a wildlife area, and it's got a lot of elk, and so to manage that population, you can take a bull and cow.
I should have said bull. So,
Bull,
excuse me.
yeah.
Yes.
Bull and cow is for elk, and then buck and
Buck
doe.
and
for
doe.
deer.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. All right. Cool. So talk about the Rocky Mountain elk and how did that happen? Why is this Rocky Mountain elk here in Kernville?
Yeah, we assume it came from like the Tone Ranch area, and that's huge landowner. But from what I'm understanding is there's a rancher outside of Tehachapi that had these Rocky Mountain elk, and they
Years
got
ago.
out. Yeah,
Years
years and
ago.
years ago, they got out, and from that herd they got out, they populated, and they gravitated towards what is now known as Tone Ranch, and there's hundreds and thousands of them out there.
Is there?
Yeah, they're doing really well. Yeah, big,
Really?
and they're a substantially larger animal, and
So people are hunting those.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
and but it's primarily on Tone Ranch, and they have their own hunt program, and Tone Ranch is the landowner, so it's not just public access. But there's a lot of elk.
It's a
up there.
bigger animal.
So
It's substantially bigger than a Tule elk.
So why are they staying on Tejon Ranch? I mean, we got one rover here. Does that mean that they might be moving this way, or how does that?
It's a very strong possibility. I mean, you got dominating bulls. They got a harem. They got their cows, and and so you got these younger animals, spike raghorn bulls we call them, and they're gonna need to go find find their females and their herd, and so they're going to move around.
And fences aren't barbed wire fences aren't really a barrier for them. They can just jump those easy. There's not very few. There's few barriers that they can't get through.
So what is this guy doing here in Kernville? Is he he's
happy,
cruising around eating?
Yeah,
he's out in the golf course just grubbing.
Perfect for them.
They'll move some long distance.
Will he move up? Do you think the river, or is it kind of just no one knows?
Yeah, and
what do you think?
If it is Rocky Mountain, they're a little more adaptable to higher elevations and a little more rugged, colder weather and whatnot. And they might, surely it could get up here and go, well, there's no ladies around. I'm going to go home and go turn around, and they go all the way back. Okay. But at some point, if that is, he had to cross Highway 58.
I know.
Highway 178.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
He had to go through. He had to go up through Lake Isabella, and then cross the highways there.
Maybe he came through Walker Basin, up through Bodfish, and then we're getting reports of him up in Kelso Valley Road, up in there. Yeah, okay. They've been seeing him in there. And then there's a herd out in Jawbone, but that's more on the desert side of things. Mm-hmm. So if it is a Tule elk, then it probably would have had to come either from Owens Valley or Lone Pine, or from Wind Wolves Preserve, which is on the west side of I-5. Mm-hmm. So it's
still a long way. Any way you cut it, it's a long way to go.
Pretty cool, huh?
So the ones on the Tejon Ranch were put there, or are they from that guy's ranch that ended up on there?
They escaped onto Tejon.
Okay, interesting. And then people pay big money to go onto Tejon Ranch to get those guys, don't they?
A lot of money.
This next clip is from episode number 62 with Roger Bloom, who's a retired California Department of Fish and Wildlife biologist, and he talks about the incredible California Heritage Trout Program.
Awesome. So let's talk about the California Heritage Trout Program, and for those who don't know, what is it?
So it's a angler recognition program that the department started in, I think, 2003. We initially started it in the process in 2000, and it stems from me going to shows and realizing that a lot of people, anglers specifically, didn't know of the diversity of native trout that we had in California. And so I, after going to show after show after show, I realized we got to do something to kind of change that. And so in 1998, we established the Heritage Trout Program, and a part of that was to promote native trout restoration and education. Mm-hmm. So about that time, the Wyoming Department of Wildlife, Fish and Wildlife had come up with the Cut Slam. So it was brand new. And so I reached out to those guys, Ron Rennick specifically. He was kind of the guy that created it. And I started talking to him about that and wanted to replicate it because I found it fascinating. My wife and I went there and we did the Cut Slam. And I was like, we got to have something like this in California. But we didn't want to do exactly the same thing. And that's basically a program that acknowledges anglers that catch for the Wyoming one, the 4 different cutthroats. And we have way more native trout than, just 4. So after about 3 years, starting in 2000 and ending in 2003, we came up with a program that acknowledged anglers that catch 6 native trout in California in their original watersheds. And we hemmed and hawed about the name. I threw out the California Heritage Trout 6-pack. That got denied. We had all kinds of fun trying to figure out that aspect and the number too, because we have so many. So we got out a map and we figured out, we didn't want anglers to necessarily just do this in a weekend. They had to put some time in and do some research because the education, the big part of it is learning where these fish live and the unique habitats. So we landed on 6. And so anglers that catch 6, they document and submit an application with a photo. They receive a certificate that's kind of customized to their catch with Joe Tomilari's images, and they also get a hat. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I think the program is north of 500 anglers that have completed it to date. So right now we're kind of in a holding pattern for the Paiute because right now, given our restoration, we had to kind of close that fishery down, at least the ones that would qualify. So hopefully in the future, that's a whole nother aspect in the story we could talk about. Anglers will be able to go after the Paiutes, and some anglers were lucky enough to get some early on in the challenge. But there's still plenty of opportunities to get the 6 if you put in the work and talk to folks like you and realize where those fish are.
Here's some feedback for you, and let me clarify this. So you were the one of the people responsible for the Heritage Trout Program, it sounds like.
Yeah, so that was early
awesome.
on. I spent a lot of years in that program, the Heritage and Wild Trout Program. In 2000, I was a regional wild trout biologist for Southern California, and that's when I came up with the idea and worked with Ron in Wyoming. So I spent a large part of my career either as a regional wild trout biologist or in the statewide crew running around doing wild trout work. And then moved on. But that was a large part of my career at the department working in that program.
Did you write the book that goes along with that too?
Yeah, well, I ghost wrote it. So I had my staff write it so they could get, some writing experience. But the design, the format, the concept, the artwork on the front, all of that stuff, I worked on for probably about 2 or 3 years. And so, did you get a copy of that?
Of course, man. And I what a beautiful book. And don't quote me on this, but is that book free if people want it?
It is. And there was, classic California bureaucracy. They wanted to sell it. And so initially, because it's a beautiful book, it's a coffee table type style, a lot of photos. We put a lot of effort into maximizing the photos and the maps and have it as a guide. But I felt really uncomfortable, trying to make it and charge it to the anglers. So I found some grant funding, and we got an initial run to print the first version. They ran out of them. I've got some. Before I left, I asked the program lead, I'm like, hey, I'm working at a fly shop. I will be selective and try to get these out to folks, that show that passion. Yeah. But I do believe they're planning on doing another run, and hopefully those will be free as well.
Yeah, I got one. I don't know where I got it. I think I might have got it from you at one of the meetings in Sacramento or something. Sure.
I wanted to make sure, because having them in the shop and having just like a shop copy, so especially where you're at with where you're juxtaposed to all those fish on the Kern, in the club. So I really wanted the shops and the clubs to have one so they could use as kind of a reference. So I'm glad you got one.
Well, feedback. I've got another question too, but I'm going to give you some feedback on, since you created that program, it's helped me guide people, in the areas where I'm at, for the golden trout and the little Kern golden and the Kern rainbow. And I just wanted to let you know that, that's created, some work for us down here.
Awesome. I figured it would be.
Yeah, man. Big time. Great. People come from all over the world, man, to catch golden trout. That's like a big deal.
Yeah, we did. There was a period where, I was running clinics throughout the state for anglers that just, wanted to go out. And so it was almost basically a free guided trip. And we would camp out at Peppermint and some of the other places. And I would take them down to the Forks and to Clicks Creek. And, we would do the rounds. And that's probably one of the most enjoyable, rewarding things I ever did was, working with those anglers to get their challenge and take them to that unique place. So, I'm glad you guys are seeing anglers still coming in and asking for that.
That's awesome. So how many fish are there in the state of California? Native fish. Native trout. Yeah.
Native trout, 11. 11 as it stands. There are some unique fish in the red band complex, potentially up in Klamath, that we may add to that list.
Really? Cool.
Yeah. I mean, that's the challenge, and we may touch on genetics, but as you go down that rabbit hole, we start to see some unique things get teased out. So we may add to that list.
That's awesome. And from what I understand, the bull trout was in that mix there for a while, or is it still, or is it extinct?
So functionally, it's extinct. As far as we know, there was a action in, I want to say maybe the early 90s to do a reintroduction program with some Oregon bull trout.
Oh, awesome.
And it was cool. And we had some challenges in regards to private property. There has been some recent acknowledgments that there may still be some bull trout in the McLeod drainage. But we're kind of challenged with access to be able to verify and get the genetics. But there is the chance that there's still some remnant fish from that reintroduction from the Oregon fish still bumping around in the McLeod.
So I heard you say red band complex, and then I also know there's a golden trout complex. So would you mind talking about that?
Yeah, sure. So you're well familiar with the golden trout complex, and that is the Kern River rainbow, California golden trout, and a Little Kern golden trout. And so we kind of refer that as the complex of that Kern basin, and where those fish are endemic. We also kind of use that in regards to the upper Sacramento complex for red bands, which have the Goose Lake, the Warner Lakes, and the McLeod. So we kind of use that terminology to kind of bundle those species and those subspecies in those areas.
This next clip is from episode number 32 with Mikey Weir from CalTrout, and he talks about some of the dam removals going on in California.
I was looking at CalTrout's website yesterday and just looking at all the different projects that they have going on and trying to help cold water species is amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's just...
it's incredible. And the volume of work we're doing now, I mean, I was just on my staff call before this, and we've hired 11 new employees this year alone. I mean, the growth has just been phenomenal. I mean, this was like through the the economic downturn. I got hired in 2012. We were just kind of like coming out of recession and through COVID and everything. I mean, our work never slowed down during COVID, and it didn't affect any of our projects at all. I mean, we just kept going. And, so when I started with CalTrout, I was the 11th or the 12th employee hired. I mean, it looked like in the entire organization, I was like the 11th employee.
Wow.
We were a $1.5 million organization in 2012 when I started, and this year we just did our budget at like $28 million.
Nice.
And like 38 employees or close to 40 employees now.
So cool. So great.
So yeah, they're cranking, and we're cranking. We're all busy. This month's been insane for me. I did an event last weekend in Guerneville, and then a talk for a fly club in Fresno on Thursday. Tomorrow I'm heading to Mammoth for a project tour. Back for the Yuba Fest on Saturday on the Yuba River. And then a couple more events after that. We're busy.
What's the biggest or I guess what's the projects that you guys are most focused on right now?
Oh gosh, there's a ton. I mean, we've got big projects in every region. I think for me, one of the things that I'm the most interested and stoked on is the Klamath dam removals.
Okay.
I've gotten to spend quite a bit of time up there, and it's just one of my favorite places in California that's just so remote and so wild back there, wild wilderness, wild animals, wild people. It's just it's such a cool corner of California, and it's going to be the biggest river restoration project in history. The whole world is looking at this and seeing, how this is going to go down, and it could serve as a model for many other projects for decades to come. It's the biggest social justice project probably happening in America right now. Reuniting the tribes with their salmon, restoring, continuing their historic fishing rights. Giving them back a wild river in perpetuity. For like the 7 tribes up and down the Klamath that literally still rely on that river for a living every day. And there's not very many places like that left, where a river is healthy enough to actually like provide a living for people. Yeah. And, so yeah, it's a big, it's a big deal. And just all the ecological benefits of it, and the economic benefits of it, the ecotourism aspect of it. And there's just, it's a multifaceted project, and it's a really big deal. And Cal Trout's been, working on that project for over 20 years. I mean, Curtis has been there, I think 21, 22 years now. He's been working on the Klamath dam removal since he started with Cal Trout. So he's been at every, all those early meetings and negotiations and all that. And then Drew Brock kind of took the reins from there for a good 5 years. And now we have a new guy, Damon Goodman, up there in Shasta, and he's kind of taken over now. And we're highly involved. And then so spiraling off of that is we have all these other projects that we've been doing to prepare for this. So we've been really like one of the only organizations that's boots on the ground in the Shasta River, the Scott River, trying to move a little bit into the Salmon River, but working on doing good work and restoration on the tributaries to the Klamath, and specifically the Scott and the Shasta, which are two of the best spawning tributaries, and also the two that are closest to the dams. And so these are the populations of fish that are going to repopulate those upper areas once the dam is out. And so we've been doing a ton of work and hard work. I mean, we're working with ranchers there in Siskiyou County that are, primarily anti-dam removal people, but we are giving them, millions of dollars worth of infrastructure upgrades to their ranches to make them more efficient, so we can keep more water in the streams and remove barriers and make it better for coho salmon, for Chinook, and for the different runs of steelhead, and then all the genetics work we're doing up there, with the identification of the gene that separates spring run Chinook from fall run Chinook. They isolated the genome that, proves that it's a genetic adaptation that took thousands or millions of years to do. And so we were able to list those fish as a separate species, which adds additional protections to them. So it's, there's a ton going on up there. It's I could go on the rest of this call just about the Klamath. There's
a lot of dam removal projects that are in the works, right? Like the Matilahaw Dam, is that one still kind of in the works there too? And have you heard anything about that?
Yeah, so Cal Trout did a comprehensive analysis of basically every major dam and even most of the smaller barriers in California. And just to look at, which ones are still operating how they should be, which ones are going to need, infrastructure upgrades in the coming years, which ones are totally obsolete. And when I say obsolete, it just means it's not performing the function that it was built to perform anymore. And so, we got dams of varying degrees all over California, and they were built for different stuff. Some of them are hydropower dams, some of them are flood control dams, some of them are silt control dams. Some of them are dams that were built to impound water for municipal uses, for agriculture and for municipalities. And so assessing whether these dams are still functioning, and then we distilled it down to like 25 that are, basically not working how they should, or are coming up for needing to be upgraded. And then we distilled that down to our top 5 dams, which are the biggest priority. And all these are the ones that are on the hit list, which is basically dam removal. And so you got Rins Dam on Malibu Creek. You got Matilahaw Dam on the Ventura River. You've got Searsville Dam in Stanford there. And then you have Scott Dam on the Eel River, and then the Klamath dams, which includes all 4 of the main stem dams on the Klamath. And so that's our top 5 priorities right now. All those are Rins is slated for removal. Matilahaw is slated for removal. It's been a 20-year process or more. But Rins was recently approved to be removed, and so now we're working through that process. Matilahaw is definitely in the way. They actually just opened up the first bridge below Matilahaw, so they had to do a bunch of infrastructure upgrades below the dam before they could remove it to accommodate for the silt and stuff moving through there. So they just finished the first big bridge project that's going to allow the next step for dam removal. So that's cool.
Oh, wow.
This next clip is from episode number 35 with Gary Arnanian from the Kern River Conservancy, and he talks about the Kern River Rainbow Project.
Back in end of August, Fish and Wildlife teamed up with the Merced Fly Fishers, and they sent a crew out for 2 weeks in the backcountry, and they did a 10-day trip to the Kern-Kuya Gap area.
Mm-hmm.
And they hiked in 3 days to get to their first target location. And it was all, they pretty much fished every creek, swimming hole, pond, lake, whatever you can call it, that had a body of water. They fished it, waterfalls, whatever. If they saw water flowing, they threw a fly in there to see if they'd catch something. And they caught about 200 trout, rainbow trout. And they did their thing. They clipped the fins and they, got all that back down here. They came back after 2 weeks and all the samples have been sent out. So I've heard different stories. I've heard it's gone to the biologists at Fish and Wildlife. I heard some of them went to UC Davis or Berkeley, and they're all being studied to see which is the most pure strain. I know for a long time, Fish and Wildlife was really obsessed with 100%. And we want 100% genetic. And it's hard. You're not going to find 100% anywhere. And if that's what your goal is, then this project will never be accomplished. So I've heard that they're kind of settling for 95 or 90% genetic. So we'll see what happens with what they've caught up there. One of the guys that went over there is a good friend of mine. He went on this trip and he said that the country out there is just unbelievable. He's like, we caught Kern River rainbows that you would dream about. Like the beauty, the sizes, the wildness that they were catching was unbelievable. And he's pretty stoked. He feels confident they got some good fish. These are all areas that they had never searched before. And they've never fished before.
Nice. Did they film it and do anything like that?
No, I sent a GoPro with them to film it because we're still working on that documentary that we started several years ago.
Yeah.
To film the whole document of bringing Kern River rainbows back here. It's taking a lot longer because we just didn't expect Fish and Wildlife to continue putting things on hold with this project. With 2018, we had the earthquake, right? So then there was some damage to the trail and they didn't go. And then the next year they had... the volunteers were very, very old and couldn't hack the high altitude, so they got sick and they had to come back and the trip got canceled. Then you had COVID. Then the year after that was the fires.
Mm-hmm.
And so then this year it was like green light, we're going, we're doing it. And it was like so short notice. Like I got like a 10-day notice on this. And there's no way I could have gone. Yeah. And there's no way our camera guy was going to be able to go on a short notice like that. So I ran down to Bakersfield, went to Best Buy, picked up a GoPro, the best one they had, the latest model, bought extra batteries, charging cable, whatever you can imagine. I bought everything for these guys. Drove from Bakersfield all the way to Bishop to meet with them, dropped all the stuff, showed them how to use the GoPros, and they were off. And then I came back 2 weeks later to meet with them in Bishop, and I was going through some of the footage, and it's just
is it good?
Unbelievable.
Oh, nice.
For a bunch of amateur guys, what they got, recorded is so. The countryside up there, obviously,
insane.
It's insane, and the fish they were catching and the process, they documented everything like so well. We gave them a shot list of what we wanted to make sure they got all that, and they did, and they did a great job. So
nice,
they
man.
brought back I think 200 hours of footage.
Oh, sweet.
So it's going to take us some time to go through all that and figure out what's going to stay and what's not going to stay. And then obviously when you cut that, then you bring it down. We have to take 200 hours and drop it to 3 minutes.
So for those that don't know, kind of explain like what this whole Kern River Rainbow Project is all about, what they plan to do, with these fish, what they're going to do with the hatchery, how it's all tying together, and then what the ultimate goal is for the Kern. Yeah.
So right now, all the fish that you catch in the Kern River, the really basic rainbows that you're catching are coming from the San Joaquin hatchery. They could be a combination of McLeod or Eagle Lake rainbow trout, and just really there's no consistency. It's whatever they have money to buy is what they're stocking. So the trucks come up here twice a week. You see them driving around Kernville, stocking the river in town and upriver. And so that's what they're doing. And the goal is to get rid of that and have the fish that are being stocked in the river to be native Kern River rainbows that can reproduce. Because the fish they're bringing there are triploids, they don't reproduce. They're sterile fish, and the purpose is that we don't want hybridization between, farm-raised fish and native fish. So until they get this all genetics things figured out, and then the hatchery reopens, that means that we'll have pure Kern River rainbows being raised at the hatchery and being stocked in the lake or in the river. And those fish will be able to reproduce with each other to keep the population going and sustainable.
So here's my question to you, and so what you think is what this is all about. So, we have the triploid fish that are being stocked in the Kern, and that's been going on for years and years and years. But there's a dilemma. There's fish that are being stocked in Lake Isabella that from what I heard, can reproduce, and they're from Nebraska or wherever they're, the Nebraska tailwalkers or whatever those fish are. So do you know anything about that as far as like what their plan is to do with those fish? Because all those fish end up coming into the Kern. I've caught them. My clients have caught them. And so, that's kind of an interesting.
Yeah, it's been brought up to conversation with Fish and Wildlife. They don't really have an answer to that, of course,
what can they
which
do,
is not surprising. But Lake is about that is permitted through the Chamber of Commerce down there. They're the ones who stock the fish for the Derby every year. And I think in the eyes of Fish and Wildlife, it's like, well, they have a permit. They're doing everything legit. They're buying the fish from a licensed farmer or whatever. Blah blah blah. So they don't see anything in their eyes. Like you've been to these meetings, their biologists are they're not the brightest people.
Yeah.
When we sit there tell them that these fish are swimming upstream into the Kern, and they're like, oh no, they're not. That's impossible. Like no, it is. Come here and fish, and you'll see.
Yeah.
There's a reason the section of the river in Kernville is called Steelhead Run. It's because sort of the tailwalkers are showing up, and the people are catching these like monster trout. But yeah, it's just. They see things different. Like a biologist for Fish and Wildlife has a different point of view than a biologist that was working for an environmental group. For us, it's all about native and keeping the natives protected.
Right.
And on their end, it's a business. Oh, they have a permit. They're legitimate, so they can plant whatever the fish they want.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's an interesting thing that's probably got to be addressed. If they're going to do the Kern River rainbows in the Kern and keep stocking. Fish that can reproduce in the lake, they're gonna have to figure something out there.
Yeah, I'm sure when that day comes, it's gonna be an advocacy thing between us and the fly fishing community, and we're gonna have to find a medium, because obviously we don't want to ruin an amazing event that the Chamber of Commerce is putting on that draws tens of thousands of people here for its commerce and the economy here. It's a booster, but at the same time, the people that are fishing the Derby don't care what they're catching. They're not stoked if they caught a native Kern rainbow or they caught a catfish. They don't care. Yeah. Those guys just want to catch fish.
Sure. So it's an interesting thing that goes on. So back to the hatchery. So the pipe that you were talking about that needs to be fixed, is that the one coming from KR3?
I don't know. They didn't really describe.
Oh, okay.
They didn't give me a description. They said that there's a pipe that was very, very old and it's deteriorated and it was not caught in the initial assessment of the renovations.
Okay. Interesting. What other projects you been working on?
We're doing some fire prevention stuff as well with the Forest Service and Kern County Fire. We're trying to get preparedness, readiness programs going for people up here. We've had 2 devastating wildfires in the last 2 years here. And one thing we learned is no matter how much people think they're prepared, they're not.
Yeah.
And, with the French fire, we saw that. And we stepped up and we tried to help as much as we could with the resources we had. And after that fire, I just said, I'm going to start looking into how we can help this community be better off, not just being prepared for it, but as a response as well. We went out our way and we were buying pizzas from the pizza barn and taking them to the shelters where people were sleeping, who had lost their homes. We were taking pizzas down to the fire camp to feed the firefighters, and we did everything we could to help out. But I just saw that there was a void, living in a rural community like in Kern County, that's the downside, is we live in this beautiful place, but the resources are so limited for people in these rural areas, and they have to rely heavily on nonprofits to step up sometimes. And I think that's where Kern River Conservancy has been successful at doing, is we identify the problem as failed government responses or not enough response. So we have to step that up and help out. During the French fire, people were complaining they weren't getting information from the agencies. Nobody knew what was going on. And we use our resources and our connections to find out the most up-to-the-minute fire information there was, so we know how to address that. And, we had a great partnership with the Forest Service and Kern County Fire and get that information out there. As a third party, non-agency, we don't have red tape. We don't have bureaucrats telling us what to do. We can publish that. And that's what we were doing. We're putting fire information out as fast as we were getting it. If somebody's working on a line, boom, I know about it. Here's what's going on. This might be coming down. But I couldn't really post that right away, until I got confirmation from the higher ups. But we were putting it out there, and we became this resource of information for everybody out here. Yeah. And it really grew the capacity of this group to not just be an environmental group, but we became a big beacon for the community for help,
Did you ever think that would be where you guys would lead?
Absolutely. Like today I was at a homeless meeting. We're trying to figure out how we can address the homeless situation in the valley, right here in Kern Valley.
In the valley?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So now we're getting involved in that because we do have homeless people that camp in the campgrounds, and those are things that we have to deal with, whether it's trash or stuff like that. So that falls on the hands of whether it's BLM or Forest Service or even with us. Sometimes things can get a little busy, especially in the off season. Like right now, a lot of the employees are gone; they're seasonal employees, so a lot of volunteers start picking up the slack on.
With everything going on in the world today, right now could be the best time ever to diversify your retirement savings with precious metals like gold and silver. I just bought some precious metals myself, and I got them from the top-rated company Goldco. They couldn't have made the process easier, and their customer service was impeccable. Goldco has helped thousands of people just like you and me place over $2.5 billion in gold and silver. They're rated A+ by the Better Business Bureau. They've earned over 5,000 5-star reviews. They're a 7-time Incorporated 5,000 winner. And that's just mentioning a few of their accomplishments. There's plenty more. Right now, for my listeners, they're offering up to $10,000 in bonus silver. You heard that right, up to $10,000 in bonus silver, but only while supplies last. Go to goldco.com/guy to learn more. That's goldco.com/guy. Diversify your savings with gold and silver today at goldco.com/guy.
It's a Guy Jeans podcast.